Every country around it chose war. Great empires rose and fell on its very borders. 2 world wars burned across Europe. Millions of people died. But one small, quiet country did something almost impossible. It stayed out. It did not fight. It did not choose sides. Today, we discovered how. Long before Switzerland existed, the land was wild and cold. Enormous mountains covered the center of Europe. Deep valleys hid between the peaks. Rivers ran fast and loud. Snow stayed on the ground for months. Most people looked at this land and thought, no one can live here easily. But people did live here. And they learned something important early. The mountains were not just obstacles. They were protected. The first people we know of in this region were called the Helvetii. They were a Celtic tribe, a group of people with their own language, culture, and way of life. The Romans called them brave. The Romans also tried to conquer them. And for a long time, the Romans succeeded. Julius Caesar himself fought against the Helvetii in 58 BC. The tribe tried to migrate, to move their entire people to a new land. Caesar stopped them. He pushed them back into their mountain home. For hundreds of years after that, the land belonged to Rome. Roman roads were built through the mountain passes. Roman soldiers stood guard. Roman towns grew in the valleys. But Rome did not last forever. When the Roman Empire fell apart in the 5th century, the mountains filled with new people. Germanic tribes moved in. Burgundians came from the west. Alemanni came from the north. The land had no single name yet, no single ruler, no single identity. That would take a very long time to build. For centuries, the mountain lands passed from hand to hand. Different kings claimed the territory. Different nobles ruled different valleys. The land was divided, a patchwork of small communities, each with its own leaders and its own rules. Then, one family decided they wanted it all. The Habsburgs were one of the most powerful royal families in Europe. They were ambitious. They were organized. And in the 13th century, they began to tighten their grip on the mountain communities. The people of the mountains did not like this. 3 small communities, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, made a decision together. They would not be ruled by a distant king. They would govern themselves. In 1291, the leaders of these 3 communities met near a meadow called Ertlai. They stood together beside a lake. And they made a promise. They would protect each other. They would stand together. They would resist any outside power that tried to control them. This moment, this quiet promise in a mountain meadow, is considered the birth of Switzerland. It was not a grand battle. It was not a royal decree. It was simply 3 communities saying, we choose each other. The Swiss Confederation had begun. It was small. It was fragile. And powerful enemies surrounded it on every side, but it had something stronger than armies. It had unity. The Swiss Confederation grew slowly, more communities joined, more valleys added their voices, and something unexpected happened. The Swiss became famous, not for their art or their palaces, but for their soldiers. The mountain people were tough. They were disciplined. They trained hard in the cold air of the Alps. And they fought differently from other armies in Europe. Most European armies used knights on horseback, heavily armored, slow, and expensive. The Swiss fought on foot. They moved quickly. They worked together like a single body. They were almost impossible to defeat. Word spread across Europe. Kings and princes began to hire Swiss soldiers to fight their wars. This was called the mercenary system. Soldiers who fight for pay, not for their homeland. Swiss men left their valleys and fought in France, in Italy, in the courts of popes and kings. It brought money back to the mountains. It brought pride. The 15th century was a golden time for the Confederation. They defeated the powerful Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Bold, in a series of famous battles. They defeated him once, then twice, Then a third time. They fighted. They won. They grew stronger. The Swiss reputation spread like fire across Europe. Enemies feared them. Allies wanted them. Even the Pope wanted Swiss guards protecting him. To this day, the Pope's personal bodyguards are Swiss. That tradition is over 500 years old. But strength on the outside does not always mean peace on the inside. In the 16th century, a powerful new idea swept across Europe. It was called the Reformation. A German monk named Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church. He said the Church had become corrupt. He said ordinary people deserved to read the Bible in their own language. He said faith was personal, not controlled by priests and popes. The idea spread fast, and it reached Switzerland. In Zurich, a priest named Ulrich Zwingli took up the cause. In Geneva, a brilliant and intense thinker named John Calvin built an entire new vision of Christian society. Switzerland became one of the great centers of Protestant thought in Europe. But not everyone agreed. The Confederation split. Some communities stayed Catholic, some became Protestant. Old friendships broke apart. Neighbors who had protected each other for generations now looked at each other with suspicion. There were small wars. There were moments of real violence. Zwingli himself died on a battlefield in 1531, killed fighting against Catholic Swiss communities. It was a painful time, a confusing time. The unity of the mountain meadow felt very far away. But the Confederation survived. It did not break completely. The communities chose, again and again, to stay together, even in disagreement. That choice would define Switzerland forever. While Switzerland argued with itself, Europe was tearing itself apart. The 30 Years' War began in 1618. It was one of the most devastating conflicts in European history. Armies marched across Germany, France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Cities burned. Populations collapsed. Millions of people died from war, famine, and disease. Switzerland watched from its mountains. It did not join. It did not choose a side. It sent no armies. It signed no alliances. This was not cowardice. It was a very deliberate choice. The Swiss had learned something painful from their own religious conflicts. War between neighbors destroys everything. Unity is fragile. Peace must be protected carefully, even if that means stepping back from the world. And so they stepped back. In 1648, when the Great War finally ended, something remarkable happened. The Peace of Westphalia, the treaty that ended the conflict, formally recognized Switzerland as an independent nation. Separate from the Holy Roman Empire. Separate from the great powers around it. The world had officially acknowledged what the Swiss already knew. They stood alone. And they stood together. For 150 years after Westphalia, Switzerland lived quietly. It was traded. It prospered. Its bankers became known across Europe. Its watchmakers built instruments of extraordinary precision. Its thinkers, Rousseau, Voltaire's neighbor, the scientists of Geneva, shaped the ideas of the modern world. Switzerland felt safe behind its mountains. And then something happened that no one expected. Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1798, French revolutionary armies marched across Europe with terrifying speed. They believed in a new world, liberty, equality, fraternity. But they also believed in French power. And they looked at Switzerland and saw something they did not like. They saw a country that was divided. Messy, old-fashioned. They decided to fix it. French soldiers crossed the Swiss border. The old Confederation, the system built on that quiet promise in the mountain meadow, collapsed in weeks. 500 years of careful, fragile unity fell apart almost overnight. Napoleon imposed something new. He called it the Helvetic Republic. It had a modern constitution, a centralized government, one set of laws for everyone. The Swiss hated it. They were not used to being told what to do. They were not used to one central authority. Community after community rose up in resistance. There were uprisings. There was chaos. Napoleon grew frustrated. He called Switzerland, these stubborn, divided mountain people, the most difficult nation in Europe. It was almost a compliment. By 1803, Napoleon himself gave up trying to force unity on them. He allowed Switzerland to return to a looser system, but the old world was gone forever. Everything was about to change, and nothing would ever be the same. Napoleon was defeated in 1815. The great powers of Europe met in Vienna to rebuild the world he had broken. And Switzerland was there. At the Congress of Vienna, something extraordinary happened. The major European powers, Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia, looked at Switzerland and made a formal declaration. They recognized Swiss neutrality as permanent, official, protected by international law. It was the first time in history that a country's neutrality was guaranteed by the world. But why did the great powers agree to this? Because Switzerland was useful to everyone. A neutral Switzerland meant a safe meeting place. A neutral Switzerland meant a reliable banking system. A neutral Switzerland meant mountain passes that stayed open for trade, not controlled by any single empire. Everyone benefited from a Switzerland that belonged to no one. The Swiss understood this, and they built their entire identity around it. In 1848, after revolution swept across Europe, Switzerland wrote a new constitution. It was modern. It was democratic. It gave significant power to local communities, called cantons, while creating a federal government for shared decisions. They adapted. They did not cling to the old ways completely, but they also did not abandon what made them Swiss. Local identity stayed strong. The four national languages, German, French, Italian, and Romansh, were all recognized and respected. Switzerland chose a path that very few countries have ever managed. It chose to be many things at once. And it worked. Then came the 20th century, and two wars that shook the entire world. In 1914, the First World War began. Empires collapsed. Trenches filled with young men. Poison gas drifted across battlefields. Millions died in mud and darkness. Switzerland did not fight. But it did not look away. The Swiss opened their borders to wounded soldiers from both sides. They allowed prisoner exchanges on their soil. The International Red Cross, founded in Geneva by a Swiss man named Henry Dunant, worked tirelessly to bring some humanity to an inhumane war. Switzerland was an island of quiet in a burning world. Then came 1939. Adolf Hitler. The Second World War. This time, the pressure was almost unbearable. Nazi Germany surrounded Switzerland on three sides. Hitler's generals drew up plans to invade, a plan called Operation Tannenbaum. Swiss cities were marked on German military maps. The Swiss mobilized their entire army. Every mountain pass was mined. Tunnels were prepared for destruction. The Swiss made a clear and silent message: entering this country will cost you everything. But there was also darkness inside Switzerland during this time. Swiss banks accepted gold from Nazi Germany. Some of that gold came from Jewish families who had lost everything. Switzerland stayed safe, but not without moral cost. This is a painful truth. The Swiss themselves have acknowledged it. Neutrality protected Switzerland, but neutrality also had a price, and history does not let anyone forget. When the Second World War ended in 1945, Europe lay in ruins. Cities had been destroyed. Economies had collapsed. Millions of families had lost everything. The work of rebuilding a continent would take decades. Switzerland was intact. Its cities stood. Its banks functioned. Its infrastructure was undamaged. While its neighbors rebuilt from almost nothing, Switzerland moved forward from a position of extraordinary strength. The world needed what Switzerland offered. International organizations chose Geneva as their home. The United Nations European headquarters settled there. The World Health Organization, the International Labour Organization. Dozens of global institutions planted their roots in Swiss soil. Why Geneva? Why Switzerland? Because neutrality means trust. When every country is suspicious of every other country, a neutral space becomes invaluable. Switzerland became the place where enemies could sit at the same table, where difficult conversations could happen safely. The Swiss economy grew steadily. Banking, pharmaceuticals, precision engineering, and watchmaking built one of the highest standards of living in the world. Swiss products became symbols of quality and reliability. The country that had once survived by selling its soldiers now thrived by offering something far more valuable: stability, discretion, trust. And through it all, through centuries of war, revolution, and transformation all around it, Switzerland kept its quiet promise. The promise was made in a mountain meadow in 1291. We choose each other. We have walked a long road together, my friends. Let us stop for a moment. Let us feel the full weight of this journey. From mountain villages to the center of the world. From fragile unity to unbreakable identity. From the chaos of war all around to the quiet of a country that chose peace. 3 communities stood in a meadow and made a promise. That promise became a nation. That nation became a model for diplomacy, for stability, for what it means to choose a different way. Switzerland did not become powerful by conquering others. It became powerful by refusing to. That is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. What can the world learn from Switzerland? The first lesson is this: unity does not require sameness. Switzerland has 4 languages. It has Catholic communities and Protestant communities. It has wealthy cities and quiet farming valleys. It has never been one simple, uniform nation. And yet it has held together for over 700 years. Different people, different beliefs, one shared promise. The second lesson is about the power of position. Switzerland did not choose neutrality because it was weak. It chose neutrality because it was wise. It understood what it had to offer the world, and it protected that gift carefully. A country does not need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most important one. The third lesson is perhaps the hardest. Peace has a price. Neutrality has a cost. Switzerland benefited from staying out of the great wars, but it also made difficult compromises. History asks us to hold both truths at the same time. Greatness is rarely simple. And wisdom is knowing that. Switzerland's story is really a story about a choice. Not one big, dramatic choice made in a single moment, but thousands of small choices made again and again across hundreds of years. The choice to stay together when division felt easier. The choice to step back when fighting seemed natural. The choice to build something careful and lasting, even when the world around was burning. You are making the same kind of choices right now. Learning English is not one big moment. It is thousands of small moments. A story you listen to on a difficult evening. A word you finally understand after hearing it many times. A sentence that suddenly makes sense. Some days feel slow. Some days feel impossible. But you continue. You listen. You grow. Just like Switzerland, you are building something quietly powerful. You are building a new version of yourself. One that can speak to the world, connect with the world, and walk through the world with confidence. That journey takes time. But you have already begun.